The ultimatum. The void of space had never felt so oppressive. 12,000 warships materialized around Earth like a swarm of metal predators, their hulls gleaming under the distant light of the sun. Each vessel dwarfed anything humanity had ever constructed, their weapons arrays capable of reducing continents to molten slag. The Kryn Collective had arrived, and they expected compliance. High Commander Vectis stood on the bridge of the Sovereign Terminus, his crystalline form refracting the light from dozens of holographic displays. His species had perfected the art of conquest over millennia, absorbing 637 civilizations into their collective without firing more shots than necessary. Fear was their greatest weapon, and mathematics was their doctrine. No species could face such overwhelming force and choose anything but submission. He activated the communication array with a gesture of his multi-jointed hand. The message would broadcast across every frequency, penetrate every electronic device on the planet below. It was time to give these primitives their only choice. On Earth, Captain Zarose sat in the command center of the Global Defense Network, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, officers from every nation worked in synchronized silence. They had trained for this moment, prepared for it, dreaded it. The screens flickered to life, and an alien face appeared, beautiful and terrible in its geometric perfection. The translation came through instantly. Humanity had been studying Kryn transmissions for 32 years, ever since their probe had passed through the outer solar system, cataloging and dismissing Earth as another primitive world ripe for eventual harvest. Inhabitants of Earth, you are surrounded by the military might of the Kryn Collective. Resistance is mathematically impossible. You will surrender your planet, your resources, and your future. In return, we offer you servitude with dignity. You have 6 hours to respond. Choose wisely. The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center for exactly 3 seconds before organized chaos erupted. Officers coordinated responses, verified system statuses, and prepared contingencies. But Captain Osei remained perfectly still, her dark eyes fixed on the blank screen where the alien commander had been. Captain, her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Chun, approached carefully. Orders. Zara turned to face him, and a small smile touched her lips. It was not a pleasant smile. It was a smile of someone who had been waiting for this moment her entire life. Send the response we prepared, she said calmly. Let them know we received their message. Marcus hesitated. The standard response, ma'am? Nothing more? Nothing more. Let them wonder. Across the solar system, far beyond the orbit of Neptune, something stirred in the darkness. The Vanguard station had been built in absolute secrecy over 28 years, constructed from asteroids and hidden among the debris of the Kuiper Belt. It housed 4,000 personnel who had volunteered to leave Earth forever, to live and die in the cold void if necessary. They were humanity's insurance policy, the sword hidden behind the back. Commander James Kowalski watched his tactical display light up with Kryn signatures. His station had been silent for so long, systems powered down to minimal levels, heat signatures masked by the natural cold of deep space. The Kryn had passed within 1,000,000 kilometers and never detected them. Now it was time to wake up. All hands, this is the commander. Initiate Protocol Prometheus. Bring all systems online. Power up the drives. Charge the weapons. Today, we find out if 30 years of preparation was enough. The station hummed to life. Fusion reactors that could power small cities ignited. Weapon systems designed by engineers who had studied every Kryn engagement in recorded history came online. And most importantly, the fleet began to deploy. They were not beautiful ships. No one would write poetry about their graceful lines or elegant curves. They were brutal, functional machines built by a species that had spent its entire existence finding new ways to kill. Each vessel carried enough armor to withstand direct nuclear strikes. Each weapon system had been tested and retested until failure was no longer an option, and each crew member knew exactly what they were facing. High Commander Vectis received the human response exactly 3 hours after his ultimatum. It was brief, almost insultingly so. Message received. We are considering your offer. He studied the words, his analytical mind searching for hidden meanings. There were none. It was exactly what appeared to be a simple acknowledgement. No fear, no pleading, no desperate negotiations. Just cold, clinical acknowledgement. They are stalling, his strategic advisor, Mectrus, observed. A common tactic among primitives. They hope we will lose patience or that some miracle will save them. Vectus nodded slowly. The analysis made sense. Every species followed similar patterns when confronted with superior force. First denial, then bargaining, then acceptance. It was the mathematics of conquest, proven again and again across the galaxy. Continue scanning their planet, he ordered. I want to know every military asset they possess. Every weapon, every soldier, every resource. When they finally surrender, I want the transition to be seamless. But the scans revealed something unexpected. Earth's military presence was exactly where intelligence had predicted it would be. Naval vessels in the oceans, aircraft at their primitive bases, ground forces distributed across their nations. Everything was accounted for, yet the energy signatures were wrong. Too high, too distributed, too organized for a civilization supposedly on the brink of surrender. Tactical. Explain these readings, Vectus demanded. The tactical officer, a young Kryn named Selvix, manipulated his displays with growing confusion. High Commander. The energy output from their planet has increased by 47% since our arrival. Power generation is spiking across all major population centers. Communication networks are operating at maximum capacity. They are not shutting down. They are mobilizing. A cold sensation crept through Vectus's crystalline structure, something he had not felt in centuries. Uncertainty. He had conquered dozens of worlds personally, observed hundreds more. Never had he seen a species increase activity when faced with inevitable defeat. They should be panicking, evacuating, surrendering. Instead, they were preparing. What are they preparing for? He whispered to himself. The answer came 30 minutes later, when every detection system on every Kryn ship screamed warning simultaneously. Energy signatures were appearing throughout the solar system, not near Earth where they should be, but scattered across millions of kilometers of space. Hidden facilities were powering up, revealing themselves for the first time. Weapon platforms that had been disguised as debris were activating, and ships, hundreds of human ships, were emerging from the darkness like ghosts. Battle stations. Vectus commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. All fleet elements. Defensive formation. Locate and identify those signatures. The Vanguard station was no longer hiding. Commander Kowalski stood before his viewport, watching his fleet spread out across the void. 400 warships, each one crewed by volunteers who had given up everything to be here. They were outnumbered 30-1. The mathematics were terrible. The mathematics were also irrelevant. All ships. This is Vanguard Actual. You know your assignments. You know what's at stake. The enemy expects us to surrender. They expect us to be afraid. They've studied every species they've ever conquered, and they think they understand us. He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew, young and old, from every corner of Earth, united by a single purpose. They're about to learn that humans don't surrender. We fight, and we make sure that even in victory, our enemies remember the cost. Execute Operation Hornet's Nest. The human fleet didn't attack as a unified force. That would have been predictable, easily countered by superior numbers. Instead, they scattered like drops of water hitting hot metal, each ship taking an independent trajectory, each captain given complete tactical freedom. It was chaos, beautiful and terrifying chaos that no algorithmic prediction could anticipate. The first Kryn destroyer to engage a human vessel expected an easy kill. The human ship was smaller, slower, and outgunned. The destroyer's commander gave the order to fire, confident in the outcome. The human ship did something unexpected. It didn't evade. It didn't return fire. It accelerated directly toward the destroyer at maximum thrust. Impact in 15 seconds, the Kryn tactical officer shouted. They're not turning away. Defensive fire. Stop that ship. The destroyer's weapons tore into human vessel, shredding armor, venting atmosphere, crippling systems. Still it came, its fusion drive burning at levels that should have been impossible. At the last moment, the human ship rolled, exposing its entire weapons array, and fired everything at point-blank range. Then it collided. The explosion consumed both ships. Debris scattered across thousands of kilometers. One Kryn destroyer and one human frigate. Gone in an instant of violence that defied all tactical doctrine. High Commander Vectis watched the engagement with growing horror. They used their own ship as a weapon. They knew they would die. It was a kamikaze attack, Selvich reported, his voice shaking. High Commander, we're receiving reports of similar engagements across the fleet. The humans are not trying to win individual battles. They're trying to make us pay for every meter of space. More reports flooded in. A human cruiser had disabled its safety systems and overloaded its reactor, detonating it next to a Kryn carrier. A squadron of small human fighters had used their own bodies to shield a weapons platform long enough for it to fire. Everywhere the Kryn engaged, the humans fought with a ferocity that transcended survival instinct. On Earth, Captain Osei watched the battle unfold on her tactical displays. Each blinking light that disappeared represented lives lost, ships destroyed, families that would never see their loved ones again. The cost was terrible. The cost was also necessary. The Vanguard fleet is performing exactly as predicted, Lieutenant Chin reported. They've destroyed 83 Kryn vessels. We've lost 112 ships. What's the Kryn response? Confused, disorganized. They're trying to establish defensive perimeters, but our ships won't let them regroup. Every time they form up, we hit them from a different angle. They're starting to spread their forces thin to cover all possible approach vectors. Zara nodded slowly. It was working. Not the way the Kryn expected a battle to work, where superior numbers and firepower inevitably led to victory. This was human warfare, learned through millennia of conflict against enemies both foreign and domestic. Guerrilla tactics applied to space combat. Make them fear every shadow. Make them question every decision. Make them understand that even their victory would cost more than they were willing to pay. Activate the planetary defense grid, she ordered. All stations, all weapons. Let's show them what we've really been preparing. Across Earth, massive doors began to open. Some were built into mountains, others hidden beneath oceans, still more concealed in desert wastelands and polar ice. From these hidden facilities emerged weapons that no reconnaissance mission had detected. Rail guns capable of accelerating projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. Particle beam arrays that could burn through ship armor from hundreds of thousands of kilometers away. Nuclear missile systems with yields measured in gigatons. Each one aimed at the Kryn fleet with precision calculated by quantum computers that had been planning this moment for decades. High Commander Vectis felt something he had never experienced in his long military career. Not fear of death, not fear of defeat, but fear of a species that refused to follow the rules. The mathematics should have been absolute. 12,000 ships against a primitive civilization. Yet here he stood, watching his fleet take casualties at a rate that was unsustainable, facing an enemy that treated death as just another tactical option. Sir, we're receiving another transmission from Earth, Mectress reported. Put it through. Captain Zara Osei's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired but composed, every inch the military commander. Behind her, Vectis could see hundreds of personnel working at their stations, organized chaos that spoke of deep preparation and absolute commitment. High Commander Vectis, I am Captain Zara Osei, commanding the Earth Defense Network. I'm calling to offer you a chance to withdraw your forces from our solar system. Leave now and we will not pursue. Stay, and we will continue to destroy your ships until none remain. Vectis felt rage crystallize in his core. You cannot win. Even with your hidden forces, you are outnumbered. Your losses are unsustainable. You're correct, Zara replied calmly. We cannot win in the way you define victory. We'll probably lose 90% of our forces. Millions will die. Our planet will suffer damage that will take generations to repair. But here's what you need to understand, Commander. We don't need to win. We just need to make you lose. And by my calculations, at current casualty rates, your fleet will be reduced to less than 40% effectiveness within 18 hours. After that, Every other species you've conquered will hear about what happened here. They'll learn that the Kryn collective can bleed. They'll learn that resistance is possible. How many more rebellions can your empire handle, Commander? How many more wars like this one? The transmission ended. Vectis stood in silence, the weight of her words settling over him like a shroud. She was right. This was not about military victory. It was about cost, about precedent, about whether the Kryn collective could afford to make an example of one stubborn species, while potentially igniting rebellion across 636 others. In the depths of space, the battle continued to rage. Human ships died by the dozens, but each death came at a price. The Kryn fleet was being bled, slowly and systematically, by an enemy that refused to acknowledge the concept of acceptable losses. Humanity had been fighting for its entire existence, against nature, against predators, against disease, against itself. The Kryn had studied human history and seen only primitive violence. They had failed to understand that violence was humanity's oldest language, and humans spoke it fluently. The next 12 hours would determine not just the fate of Earth, but the future of an entire galaxy. And somewhere in the cold void between stars, on ships both human and alien, warriors on both sides prepared for what would come next. The price of arrogance. The battle had raged for 14 hours, and the void between Earth and its moon had become a graveyard. Debris fields stretched for thousands of kilometers, twisted metal and frozen atmosphere, creating artificial nebulae that glowed in the distant sunlight. The Kryn collective had never experienced anything like this. In their 6,000 years of expansion, no species had made them pay such a price. High Commander Vectis stood before a strategic display, watching the numbers that refused to lie. His fleet had been reduced to 7,400 operational vessels. The humans had lost over 300 ships from their hidden fleet and countless defense platforms. By every military standard, the Kryn were winning, yet somehow victory felt like defeat. High Commander, we're detecting another wave of human vessels approaching from the asteroid belt, Mectrus reported, his voice carrying the exhaustion of continuous combat. These signatures are different. Smaller craft, moving in tight formations. Vectis felt that cold sensation again, the one that had been growing since this battle began. Smaller craft? Fighters. Negative. These appeared to be modified mining vessels. Civilian craft repurposed for combat. Mectrus paused, checking his readings again. High Commander, there are thousands of them. They're carrying mining charges, industrial cutting lasers, mass drivers designed for asteroid processing. They've turned their entire civilian fleet into weapons. The revelation hit Vectis like a physical blow. This was beyond military resistance. This was a civilization that had mobilized every resource, every person, every tool at their disposal. They had turned farmers into soldiers, miners into warriors, scientists into weapons designers. It was total war in a way the Kryn had never encountered. Commander Kowalski watched the civilian fleet join the battle from his position on the Vanguard station. These were people he had never met, volunteers who had answered the call when Earth needed every hand. They flew ships never meant for combat, carrying weapons improvised from industrial equipment. Their life expectancy could be measured in minutes. They came anyway. Sir, the civilian fleet is engaging the Kryn picket line, his tactical officer reported. They're using swarm tactics. Dozens of small craft, overwhelming individual Kryn vessels. Kowalski nodded, his jaw tight. He had served in the military for 30 years, seen combat in the conflicts that humanity waged against itself. But this was different. This was not soldiers fighting soldiers. This was an entire species standing up and saying no, old and young, military and civilian, from every nation and culture, united by the simple refusal to kneel. Send them our tactical data, he ordered. Give them every advantage we can, and may whatever gods they believe in watch over them. In the civilian fleet, Captain Maria Santos piloted her mining hauler toward a Kryn destroyer. The ship had been her home for 20 years, hauling ore from the asteroid belt to processing stations. She knew every sound it made, every quirk of its engines. Today, it would serve a different purpose. This is Santos to all civilian vessels. She broadcast on the open channel. Remember your training. Stay in groups. Support each other. And if you're going down, take one of them with you. Our children are watching from Earth. Let's show them what humanity means." Responses came back from across the fleet, voices speaking dozens of languages, but all saying the same thing. They were ready. They were afraid. They would not back down. Maria's hauler shook as Kryn fire tore through her shields. Alarm screamed warnings she already knew. Her ship was dying. She had perhaps 30 seconds. She aimed her mining charges, designed to crack asteroids, at the destroyer's engine section and fired everything. The explosion was spectacular. The Kryn destroyer's reactor went critical, taking 3 nearby ships with it. Maria Santos never saw it. She died doing what humans had always done best, fighting impossible odds with stubborn determination. On Earth, Captain Zara Ose received reports from every battlefield. The planetary defense grid was operating at 90% capacity despite taking heavy fire. The Vanguard fleet had been reduced to 180 operational vessels, but was still fighting. The civilian fleet was dying by the hundreds, but taking Kryn ships with them. The cost was terrible. The cost was also working. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Kryn flagship," Lieutenant Chin said. "It's High Commander Vectis. He's requesting a direct communication." Zara felt her heart rate spike. This was the moment everything had been building toward. Put him through? Vectis's crystalline face appeared on her screen. He looked different than before. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been respect or might have been exhaustion. Perhaps both. "Captain Ose, I am calling to propose a cessation of hostilities." Zara kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt a surge of hope mixed with caution. "You're proposing we surrender?" "No." The single word carried weight. "I am proposing that both sides withdraw. My fleet will leave your solar system. In exchange, you will not pursue us." "That's not a cessation of hostilities," Zara replied. "That's a retreat." Vectis was silent for a moment. "Yes, it is." "Why?" Zara asked. "You still have more ships. You still have superior firepower. By your own calculations, you should eventually win." "Eventually is the problem. Captain." "Yes, we will eventually destroy your military capability. But at what cost? We've lost nearly 5,000 ships in 14 hours. At this rate, we'll lose another 3,000 before we achieve victory. And then what? We'll occupy a planet full of billions of creatures who refuse to surrender. Every city will be a battlefield. Every human a potential enemy. We'll spend decades trying to pacify a species that doesn't understand the concept." He leaned forward, and his voice dropped. "But more importantly, every species we've conquered is watching this battle. They're seeing the mighty Kryn collective bleed. They're seeing that resistance is possible. We came here to make an example. We succeeded, but not in the way we intended. You've shown the galaxy that the collective can be defied." Zara felt the weight of his words. This was bigger than Earth, bigger than this battle. This was about changing the galaxy's understanding of what was possible. "What guarantee do I have that you'll honor this withdrawal?" she asked. "You have my word as a military commander. But more than that, you have mathematics. This war is costing us more than your planet is worth. Economically, strategically, politically. Continuing makes no sense." Vectis pauset. "You've proven your point, Captain. You've shown that humanity will not surrender. We acknowledge that. Now let us both save what remains of our forces." Zara looked around her command center. Officers waited for her decision, their faces showing the exhaustion of 14 hours of continuous combat. She thought about the thousands who had already died, the thousands more who would die if the battle continued. She thought about Maria Santos and the countless others who had given everything. "I need to consult with Earth's leadership," she said. "Can you hold your fire for 1 hour?" 1 hour, Vectis agreed. "But Captain, understand that if your forces continue to attack during the ceasefire, we will respond with our full remaining strength." "Understood. 1 hour." The transmission ended. Zara immediately opened a channel to the Global Council, the collection of leaders who represented every nation on Earth. They had been watching the battle, seeing their people die, waiting for this moment. President Sarah Okonkwo of the African Federation spoke first. Captain Osei, we've heard the transmission. What's your assessment? Madam President, I believe High Commander Vectis is being truthful. The Kryn have never experienced resistance like this. They're not accustomed to paying such costs. Strategically, withdrawing makes sense for them. But can we trust them? Prime Minister Chun Wei of the Pan-Asian Alliance asked. Trust? No, but we can trust their self-interest. They came here expecting easy conquest. We've given them a war that threatens their entire imperial structure. They want out. Chancellor David Muller of the European Union spoke next. What about the other species they've conquered? If we let them leave, we're abandoning those civilizations. Zara had been expecting this question. Sir, with respect, we can barely defend ourselves. We've lost hundreds of ships and thousands of lives. If we pursue the Kryn, we'll be destroyed. But if we let them leave, we've established something important. We've shown that resistance is possible. That message alone might be worth more than continuing this battle. The council members discuss among themselves, voices overlapping in multiple languages. Finally, President Okonkwo spoke again. Captain Osei, you have authorization to accept the Kryn withdrawal, but make it clear that if they ever return to our solar system, we will consider an act of war. And next time, we'll be even more prepared. Zara felt relief wash over her. Yes, Madam President. I'll make that very clear. She reopened the channel to Vectis. High Commander, Earth accepts your proposal. You will withdraw all Kryn forces from our solar system immediately. In return, we will not pursue. But understand this. If any Kryn vessel ever enters our space again, we will consider it a declaration of war, and we will respond accordingly. Vectis nodded slowly. Understood, Captain. We will begin withdrawal immediately. But I have one question, if I may. Go ahead. How did you know we would come? Our intelligence indicated you were a primitive species, barely capable of spaceflight. Yet you had decades of preparation, hidden fleets, weapons we never detected. How? Zara allowed herself a small smile. Commander, you sent scouts to observe us 50 years ago. We detected them, and we learned everything we could from their transmissions. We learned about your collective, your methods, your history of conquest. And we made a decision. We decided to prepare for the day you would come. We put aside our differences. We pooled our resources. We built in secret, and we waited. But why fight at all? Why not simply surrender and live as part collective? Because surrender is not in our nature, Zara replied. Humanity spent millions of years fighting for survival on a planet that tried to kill us at every turn. We fought predators, disease, climate, each other. Fighting is what we do. It's written into our DNA. You offered us servitude. We chose defiance, not because we thought we would win, but because the alternative was unacceptable. Vectis was silent for a long moment. You are a danger species, Captain Osei. I hope for the sake of the galaxy that you use that danger wisely. We'll try, Commander. Now, please, take your fleet and leave our system. Over the next 6 hours, the Kryn collective withdrew. Their massive ships, so intimidating when they arrived, limped away with visible damage, leaving trails of debris. They had come expecting easy conquest and found a nightmare instead. Of the 12,000 ships that had surrounded Earth, only 7,400 remained operational. Nearly 40% casualties against a species they had dismissed as primitive. Commander Kowalski watched them go from the Vanguard station. His fleet of 400 ships had been reduced to 180. So many lives lost. So many heroes who would never see Earth again. But they had succeeded. Against impossible odds, humanity had stood its ground and forced a galactic empire to retreat. Sir, we're receiving messages from Earth, his communications officer reported. They're calling us heroes. There are celebrations in every city. People are crying and cheering, and they're saying our names. Kowalski felt tears on his cheeks. He had spent 28 years in deep space, watching his crew age and die, waiting for a war that might never come. Now it was over, and somehow they had won. Send a message to Earth Command, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Tell them the Vanguard station is returning home. It's time for us to see our planet again. On Earth, in the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Captain Zara Osei sat alone after his staff had finally left to rest. The screen showed the retreating Kryn fleet, growing smaller with each passing moment. She thought about all the people who had died to make this moment possible. The soldiers in the Vanguard fleet, the civilians in their repurposed mining ships, the defense platform crews. Everyone who had sacrificed everything. Lieutenant Chen appeared in the doorway. "Captain, you should rest. The battle is over." "Is it?" Zara asked softly. "The Kryn are leaving, yes, but they're still out there. And so are the 636 other species they've conquered. What happens to them? What happens when they hear about what we did here? Maybe they'll be inspired," Chen suggested. "Maybe they'll resist too. Maybe, or maybe the Kryn will make examples of them. Maybe we've made things worse." Zara sighed. "I don't know, Marcus. I just know that we did what we had to do. We protected our home. The rest we'll figure out as we go." Chen nodded. "That's all any of us can do, Captain. One day at a time." 3 weeks later, the first messages began arriving from across the galaxy. They came on hidden frequencies, encrypted channels, desperate transmissions from species that had been slaves for generations. They all said the same thing in different languages. "You showed us it was possible. You showed us how to fight. What do we do now?" Captain Osei stood before the newly formed Interstellar Relations Council. Representatives from every Earth nation gathered to discuss the messages. The question before them was simple but profound. What responsibility did humanity have for the rest of the galaxy? "We didn't ask for this," President Okonkwo said. "We fought to defend ourselves, not to start a galactic revolution." "But we did start one," Chancellor Muller countered. "Whether we wanted to or not, these species are looking to us for guidance, for hope. Can we ignore that?" Prime Minister Chun Wei leaned forward. "The question isn't whether we ignore it. The question is what we can realistically do. We barely survived one battle. We're not ready to take on the entire Kryn collective." Zara listened to the debate, understanding both sides. Finally, she spoke. "If I may, I think we're looking at this wrong. We don't need to fight the Kryn for these species. We need to teach them how to fight for themselves. We can share our tactics, our strategies, our technology. We can show them what we learned, that resistance is possible if you're willing to pay the price." The council members looked at each other. Slowly, heads began to nodding. "A knowledge exchange," President Okonkwo said thoughtfully. "Not military intervention, but education and support." "Exactly," Zara confirmed. "We become a beacon, not a savior. We show them the path, but they have to walk it themselves." The vote was unanimous. Earth would respond to the messages. They would share what they had learned. They would help other species prepare for their own moments of defiance, not because they wanted to conquer or expand, but because they understood what it meant to fight for freedom. High Commander Vectus received the intelligence reports about Earth's new initiative with mixed feelings. Part of him wanted to return with everything the collective had and destroy that troublesome planet once and for all. But the wiser part, the part that had been humbled by the battle, understood the truth. The galaxy had changed. The era of easy conquest was over. Species that had been passive for generations were awakening. Inspired by humanity's example, the collective could fight them all, could spend centuries trying to maintain control through force. Or they could adapt. He prepared his report for the Collective Council, knowing it would be controversial. His recommendation was simple: avoid Earth and any species they were helping. The cost of conquest was no longer worth the reward. The mathematics had changed. As Vectus sent the report, he thought about Captain Osei and her words about humanity's nature. They were a dangerous species indeed, dangerous not because of their weapons or their tactics, but because of their ideas. They had infected the galaxy with hope, and hope was the most dangerous weapon of all. On Earth, in a small town in Kenya, a young girl named Amara looked up at the stars. Her mother had told her stories about the battle, about how humanity had stood together and refused to surrender. Amara dreamed of the day she might travel to those stars, might meet the other species humanity was helping, might be part of something bigger than herself. The future was uncertain. The Kryn collective still existed. Danger still lurked in the darkness between stars. But humanity had proven something important. That courage could overcome superior numbers, that unity could defeat division, and that sometimes the greatest victory was simply refusing to lose. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the void of space, on ships both human and alien, warriors prepared for the struggles yet to come. The age of easy conquest was over. The age of resistance had begun. And at the center of it all was a small blue planet that had looked at impossible odds and said no. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not weapons or technology, but the simple, stubborn refusal to accept defeat. And it would echo through the stars for generations to come.